Hi, my name is Laura Cirillo. I'm a co-founder of CEA.
And I am Fatima Boderdabin, a contributor with CEA.
CEA presents interviews with authors discussing important topics in the field today to foster more continued discussion on relevant content. All of the citations discussed today will be present in the description, so you can dive further into the topics we discuss. Thank you for clicking on us today, and please enjoy the video.
Enjoy.
Hi, welcome everyone. Today we have a CEA interview with the authors of the publication Changing the Mentorship Paradigm, Survey Data and Interpretations from Forensic Anthropology Practitioners. That is available through Forensic Anthropology in the 2020 issue and will be linked down below.
So today we have three of the authors of that article. We have Dr. Allysha Powanda Winburn, who holds a bachelor's degree from Yale, a master's from New York University, a doctorate in anthropology from the University of Florida. Dr. Winburn is the consulting forensic anthropologist for Mobile's Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences and an assistant professor at the University of West Florida, teaching courses such as advanced methods in biological anthropology, forensic anthropology, and a 5-week forensic archaeological field school. She has recently served as a guest editor in the Forensic Anthropology Journal's special issue on diversity and inclusion, and serves as a peer reviewer for multiple journals, including Forensic Anthropology, American Anthropologist, and the American Journal of Physical Anthropology. Serving as the Anthropology Section Secretary of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, she is an Anthropology Section Fellow, as well as a diplomat of the ABFA. We also have, oh yes, that's her.
Thank you. Thanks, Fatima.
We also have Dr. Sean Tallman, who holds an associate's degree from the Shoreline Community College, a bachelor's degree from the University of Washington, a master's from the State University of New York, Binghamton, and his doctorate from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Leading the Forensic and Bioanthropology Laboratory, FAB Lab group, Dr. Tallman serves as the Boston University Graduate Medical Sciences faculty member associated with that group. As an assistant professor associated with both the Department of Anatomy and Neurobiology and the Department of Anthropology at Boston University, he has taught courses such as advanced osteology, forensic anthropological techniques, and seminars in forensic anthropology. He is on the editorial board for the American Anthropologist and Forensic Anthropology journals. Sean is the faculty liaison for the Boston University Forensic Science Society and serves on several diversity and inclusion committees at BU. Formerly serving as the co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Anthropology section of the American Association of Forensic Sciences and chair of the AAFS Diversity Outreach Committee, he is a fellow in the anthropology section of AAFS. And finally, we have Dr. Bird. Dr. Cate Bird holds a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and received both her master's and doctoral degrees in anthropology from Michigan State University. She completed postdoctoral fellowships at the University of South Florida, the Pima County Office of the Medical Examiner, and the Harris County Institute of Forensic Science. Currently, she serves as the Missing Persons and Forensic Advisor for the International Committee of the Red Cross Regional Delegation for the United States and Canada. Her work examines the humanitarian consequences of migration and strives to improve the situation of separated, missing, and deceased migrants along the US-Mexico border. Cate has also worked on other humanitarian projects, including identifying missing persons associated with the 1990s Georgia Abkhazia armed conflict and mass fatality response to Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. Welcome all authors to this nice interview. Woo! All right, so we're just going to start off with if any of you would like to describe the thought process behind the creation of the survey, which led to the article.
I would love to take this one. I describe this as our origin story. So it was February 2016. We had all just gotten back from the Las Vegas Academy meetings. And we were actually meeting up at Dr. Bird's home, Cate's home, and sort of having a post-academy debrief. The three of us and Dr. Audrey Scott, our co-author on the piece. And so we were sitting around and, discussing the meeting and who had presented what and who had talked to whom and, what was the networking experience like. And in particular, we were talking about some younger practitioners that we've sort of felt like we were playing a mentorship role for. And we're talking about how to be a good mentor, what constitutes mentorship. And at some point, one of us looked around the porch that we were sitting on having this conversation and went, this is mentorship. This is it. Like y'all are my mentors. And it was, for me, it was revelatory because I had really only conceived of mentorship in that kind of top-down hierarchical paradigm. And we said, wow, are we the only people that feel this way? Are there other people that find intense satisfaction from peer mentors as we do? How do people conceive of mentors and proteges within our field? Let's find out. So we sat there and we crafted the survey, right then and there. And the rest is history.
Thinking about the survey results that you got, did they fit within any expectations that you had, your own understanding of mentorship, or did anything come out of that really surprised you?
To the peer mentor revelation that we had, we tried not to sort of lead our respondents into weighing in on that. We asked, who are your most prominent categories of mentor? And that was one of them. But I was pretty moved by the fact that kept coming up again and again and again, even when we weren't talking explicitly about mentor demographics. If we ever gave somebody an open text box, they wrote about peer mentors in there. And so that I thought was, that sort of confirmed or supported the hypothesis that we had that this is a really important aspect of the forensic anthropological mentorship paradigm.
Yeah, and echoing what Allysha is saying, that I was also very surprised about the peer mentorship, the emphasis of respondents on peer mentorship, because again, that's what initiated our conversations with exploring mentorship. So it was nice to see that come out. So it did surprise me how common and how pervasive it was. And then something that I think sort of was in line with a lot of my sort of expectations of survey respondents is also just this kind of homogeneity in the mentor demographics that definitely was being echoed in the survey respondents. So that was kind of in line with what we had been, Cate and my work had been looking at demographics in the AAFS and particularly with forensic anthropologists. So it wasn't particularly surprising there, but it was interesting to see how it was also playing out through mentorship as well.
Yeah, and I think out of the conversations that we had at this post meeting, I think one of the things that came out of that was what different experiences we'd all had with this top-down mentorship. So my experience, in my own little academic universe is very different from what everyone else had experienced. And so that did lead to these questions of, well, is there like a general experience for our field, for our discipline, that we have these shared mentorship experiences? Are they really working as advisors? A lot of these relationships that we are having, and what's benefiting, really what's the most beneficial model do we have? What are the things we should be really cultivating in our field? So I think that's what really structured a lot of our questions and what we were looking for. I don't know if the results were all that surprising. I mean, they were, they were interesting, and the focus on peer mentorship and the benefits that brings, I think, was really came out in this survey. But just realizing that we all had in graduate school as new professionals, when we were having these discussions, very different experiences with mentorship.
Cate, that's a great point. So you said as new professionals, I think it's important to contextualize this survey as well. It was conceived when we were, many of us, still graduate students. So we were either early career professionals or still completing our doctoral degrees. So I think that a lot of us is sort of in this survey because we were living it. We had the advisor, we had the other departmental mentors, and we had each other. Even though I think obviously we've gone on and transitioned into more mentorship roles now. So it's sort of like a snapshot of issues and questions that we had at that time when we were going through grad school.
Yeah, and I think it was also interesting how, with all of us in our different mentorship or mentee experiences that, none of us had really, as far as I can remember, participated in like a formalized, mentorship program that also was an interesting, I think, thing that came out of the survey is that people would like to see a more formalized mentorship program in place, specifically in forensic anthropology. So, we're getting these mentorships from all these different places without a formal structure in place. So I think that's really interesting. And we didn't necessarily even know we were getting these mentorships or conceiving it that way within our friend group, which I think is really interesting, even though we obviously were and are.
Yeah, without a specific question about having a more codified or formalized mentorship program, 15% of respondents just brought it up in the free text boxes. So that I think was interesting too. Just to speak to the homogeneity really quickly, I was aware of, and specifically I'm thinking of like racial and ethnic homogeneity. I was aware that was a problem in our field, but I did not expect to have a survey with 123 respondents and not a single one of them identified as Black or African American. None of our respondents. And only one of our respondents reported having an African American mentor. Among majority, that person had majority white mentors, and only one person reported mentoring Black students. So that I have now come to realize did characterize the field at the time, but that was pretty shocking to me.
Just to piggyback off of that idea of like at that time, you had, right, like there was no Black respondents. So if you were to do the survey now, I think it's like 4 years later, 5 years later, do you think that, considering that the survey asked about social issues relating to gender, age, and ethnicity, and given the rise of social movements in this recent years, do you think that the survey results would be significantly different, a little bit different? Like, how do you think the results would be today?
I would certainly hope to see differences. Someone should redo the survey. I would love to see a new snapshot of a new generation of practitioners, because, in my experience, it's my interactions with younger practitioners, people who would have still been in undergrad at the time that survey came out in 2016, who are the real movers and shakers and change makers in the field.
Some of the demographics, maybe, I think with the younger generation and people in school, the demographics are changing for sure, and especially since even 2016. But I don't think we've necessarily seen the change in the upper echelons of our field. So in a lot of ways, I don't think some of this stuff will change. I think we'll still run into some of those same barriers where it's hard to maybe demographically match mentee and mentors together, and then some of the same perspectives of the older mentors. So I think that is still potentially present, but with all the social movements that we've been encountering in recent years, and particularly this last year, I really do think that what students, and I mean, a lot of us, our expectations of the field are changing. We expect more from the field. We expect more from our mentors. We expect more from our professors, from our colleagues, from our students. And so I think that would come through in a new survey, that the expectations of what a mentor is to furnish a protege, I think, would be a bit different. Or like Allysha said, I'm hoping it would be a bit different.
Yeah, we did have a little bit of a disconnect between the younger respondents sort of wanting a little more in terms of social mentorship rather than just the professionalism. But I bet we'd see even more of a push for that if we did the survey again.
So when I was looking through the survey, I thought, how would I answer if I was given these questions today? And I thought that if thinking of myself and my peers, what they've said anecdotally to me, I feel like there would be much more of a push for social guidance and advice. And I also think that maybe this goes with the respondent's idea of a sense of entitlement in proteges, but certain expectations have shifted in mentorship. Things that might have been traditionally accepted wouldn't fly anymore. And people would be demanding to have interactions with people that represented certain aspects of themselves that they may not have had with certain mentors of certain age groups, ethnicities, sexes, genders, things like that. They want to feel more represented and heard in certain issues that they may have felt were fine to be without, and would give good marks to a mentor that never addressed those things before.
That's a really good point. So much has happened in the intervening 5 years. You've convinced me. Redo it, please. I want to read new results.
Yeah, I think, that perceived bad classification of a protege having a sense of entitlement. Only a few folks reported, mentors reported that that's a bad attribute of proteges. But I do think that is in some ways related to people having expectations, and that people coming into school and into these educational programs and then work environments, and having expectations of the field, and them wanting to see those expectations. And again, that is maybe being perceived by some as a sense of entitlement, where really I think it's those people having more control and exerting more control and power in the situation of directing the field in a way that is more productive with these dialogues, and more able to tackle these issues that we've been facing. So I think that sense of entitlement problem, that could just be something wherein they're seeing people taking control of what their relationships, and I think that that's important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, we're all well aware that different professional fields have different sort of normative expectations of behavior. And the professional culture cultivated within forensic anthropology is different from that in forensic pathology, or construction work, or healthcare professionals, or politicians. And our own sort of professional culture is structured around like these expressions of acceptable, behaviors and soft skills. So I don't know, we kind of get trapped in this sort of simplistic, dichotomous sort of, I don't know, categorization of behaviors and whatnot as strengths and as weaknesses. So I don't know, I think that there's an expectation of what it means to be like an ideal forensic anthropologist, in this field. So we have a lot of these behaviors that may seem cruel, they seem cold and distant, and they're I think it's more I'm embedded in this discipline that I realize, okay, so these mentors or these advisors that were trying to act as mentors were trying to train me to be in a professional culture that was stressing a competitive spirit, territorial behaviors that were supposed to help me succeed. And they ended up coming off as cruel and distant but they're also stressing, that mentorship is also, or what people perceive as mentorship is stressing what they think is an expectation for our profession, right? And so we have to understand mentorship within that, our professional culture. And we can't change sort of mentorship by saying, we're trying to increase your ability to stay in this field without changing the culture as well. So I think that those two really do go hand in hand. And I think we're seeing this shift of our professional culture changing. So what these expectations are for sort of normative behaviors and just seeing what are weaknesses and reevaluating what those are. These senses, like a sense of entitlement, say, is, maybe reframing that. We're at a good point where we can start to understand, well, what do you mean by sense of entitlement? Why are you moving this? You're categorizing it as such and then moving it into a negative trait. I think also when you're thinking about professional culture for forensic anthropology in particular, we haven't had a lot of academic programs where students can go and apply. I mean, it's a really competitive environment, or it has been. There are a lot more options, I think, today for getting a master's or PhD, but in the past it hasn't. So, when you're talking about advisors who are accepting students and making them work overtime, potentially taking advantage of their work, saying, why are you complaining? You're lucky to be in this field. You're lucky to have this position. I think that's not just an issue of the mentor. It's an issue of the system as a whole and the culture. So I think as we start to see our professional culture evolve and change and address some of these issues, hopefully the mentorship will go along and what traits, will be seen as not as so negative and not as weaknesses,
And I think just to kind of piggyback on what Cate is saying, I think that there's this sort of pervasive or insidious idea that we should be happy to be here in this rarefied space of forensic anthropologists, either as students, graduate students, or professionals, because it is hard and it is competitive and there's not a lot of jobs and not a lot of opportunities. Like Cate said, I think that is changing too. But and so there was always just this sort of idea where like, well, you shouldn't complain. You should be happy to be here because there's others that want to be here who can't be here. And so that I think is sort of underlying a lot of perspectives. And, even though we may not have those perspectives now, and hopefully we're moving away from that, it still trickles down and pervades, especially, our experiences, say, in grad school and in undergrad. So I think that that's certainly something where we've been sort of encultured to not really speak up if we disagree with things and just sort of go with the flow and go with the system because we don't know different. So I think that that's an interesting thing. And I also think that something to come out of this also is the idea that, and I think the traditional idea is that the advisor has always been considered sort of the mentor, right? Wherein sometimes the advisor is just the advisor and not a mentor. I don't think advisor and mentor are the same term and same idea. And I think you could be one or the other or both. But I don't think that advisor means mentor inherently, and that we have multiple mentors now, right? So maybe you do have a mentor who is also your advisor. That doesn't prevent you from being mentored by somebody else as well, right? There should be no sort of co-opting that one position of being the mentor for one person. So I think that was another thing that I found interesting with this.
Yeah, that the multiplicity of mentors was something we heard again and again and again, and even people getting kind of frustrated with us for saying, describe your primary mentor. There were a couple people that were like, but I have many mentors. Like, you're denying me my mentorship experience by forcing me to pick one. So, if I had it to do over again, perhaps I would allow multiple blanks for multiple mentors. But that, I mean, they got their opinion out there, and that made it into the paper, that many people valued having many different perspectives on what is important in this field.
Also, just to follow up on that, what you said, Sean, about that people have accepted that this is the way it is and haven't spoken out. I think part of the issue with our field is that there is sort of has been this culture of if you speak out, you are causing problems, and there is it comes at a cost, and we know that. We know that that going against the grain can evoke very emotional reactions from people in our field. And even when it's, sharing a lived experience, that can, if that contrasts what is sort of this dominant idea of our field, or one of the attributes that's valued, then the pushback can be pretty severe. And if you're an established professional, might be able to sort of like blow that off and roll over it and work with it. But if you are a student or a young professional, that can have real ramifications for your job, your success, and progressing through a program. So I don't think it's just that people have accepted it. I think that people also in our field have been worried about speaking out and saying stuff. And I think that we again are moving into an era where, as more people speak out and talk about issues that they see with it, and it's a critique that should be taken not personally, but a critique of something of a system that we all want to be a part of. We want to stay in this field, and we want people to listen. So and not to have this sort of insidious cycle of, I lived through that and now you should live through that because I managed to overcome harassment or discrimination or whatnot, and now it's your time, so stop complaining and just suck it up. I mean,
remember, there was one respondent, when asked what makes a good mentor, they responded, you should know how to train yourself, and if you can't train yourself, then you don't belong in this field. So that was only one, that's a small minority of respondents, but that perspective is out there.
And I think it's important also to point out that while that person was one, they were then there mentoring and instilling that into the next generation. And from what I'm hearing you guys talk about is that a lot of the negatives that are coming out of formal mentorships are when you have these advisors that are trying to recreate basically mini me's of themselves. And so there's this need almost for that multiple mentorships where you have these different ideas. So you have a diversity in your mentorship. And I was just wondering if you guys had any other benefits to creating more formal mentorship programs so that people can have multiple.
I'm going to let Sean and Cate take that because they have excellent ideas, but I do want to caveat that fully a quarter of our respondents reported no negative mentor traits. So it's not like we're coming, we're not saying the system all the mentors are bad. The system has some issues. The mentorship paradigm is changing, but still, many of our respondents reported very satisfactory mentorship experiences. That said, we think that moving forensic anthropology mentorship toward a more formalized, codified, almost apprenticeship-like model has its benefits. And I will let my esteemed colleagues tell you what some of those benefits might be.
Well, I'll let Sean jump in, but I just want to say, just also from my own experience, and part of our conversation, which initiated, that was part of this initial conversation for the paper, was that I had, I always hold up my advisor, who is also my mentor, Norm Sauer. I had a really good experience with him as a mentor. So I mean, the complaints and whatnot, it's hard because I also see that through peer interactions that this wasn't everybody's experience. But I personally had a fantastic experience with my mentor, who happened to be my advisor. So just a shout out to Norm.
Well, yeah, and I think, with these formalized or more codified mentorship opportunities, I think, one of the findings that we observed in the survey was that there wasn't a lot of discussion of social issues in that mentor relationship. Part of that, we wonder if it's because of the homogeneity of the field, there just isn't opportunity for that discussion, especially if you're not paired with somebody who has the same identities as you. And so they've just sort of put that off of the table as a mentorship thing, and they're viewing it specifically as a professional pathway. And so I think that with these more codified mentorship programs, that more time and effort can be put into matching people's perspectives, either beliefs and perspectives, but also their identities, whether that be ancestral, racial, ethnic identities, LGBTQ, sexual orientation identities, like any identity, that I think representation really does matter. And, part of, again, thinking about mentorship and my own mentorship experience in the being in anthropology, I didn't have many LGBTQ plus folks to look up to as the more traditional mentor from the sort of top-down approach. And so a lot of that did come from friends and colleagues. So I seen a lack there of mentorship opportunities that are explicit in their LGBTQ issues that they're addressing, I think is really important. And I think that there's been research in other fields that show that, LGBTQ folks are not getting the formalized mentorship training or the casual, I should say, the more organic mentorship trainings in these overtly heteronormative spaces because of the heteronormativity of these spaces, and because of people having to navigate their identity in academia or STEM, and they might not be fully out, or they might not be out to every individual, or they have to decide who they're coming out to on a daily basis. So I think that having people that are matched in identity can be, not for everybody, it's not going to be important for everybody, but I think having that option is hugely important for at least I would say I think for LGBTQ folks, I think that would be important. So that's something that could be done rather than just putting random people together, or just putting a mentor and a mentee together, but actually thinking about who is doing what and who is identifying as such, and asking both the mentor and the protege, are these important to you in your matching? Do you want this to be prioritized, or is just professionalism or casework or what have you more important? So I think this requires getting information from both the mentor and the protege, getting their background, their identities, how important that is in that mentor relationship, in order to, I think, make it successful. So I see that as an area that could really benefit from a more codified mentorship program.
When we wrote the manuscript, there was a codified, formalized mentorship program in the process of being applied within what was then the anthropology section's standing D&I committee. So it was under the leadership of Cate and Sean at this time. They developed a formalized mentorship program. And through the months-long process of manuscript revision and review, the fate of that mentorship program was in jeopardy. And so we actually write in a footnote, pause, we just described this great opportunity, but we don't know if it's going to be available to you. And in the ensuing months, we come to find out that it isn't. It doesn't exist. All the work has been done, right? But Cate and Sean, has there been any rumblings of this being resurrected?
As far as I know, no. Shortly after the dissolution of the anthropology section D&I committee, the mentors and mentees reached out, many of them, and asked like, oh, where does this leave us? And of course, we don't want to just be like, stop what you're doing. So please continue. We can't really manage it anymore under any official capacity. And so I'm hoping that the people that we did match, there was a handful of folks who were matched, that they are continuing a relationship of, meeting monthly. But, we took the time to create that mentorship program based on other proven mentorship programs, right? And then obviously adapting it to forensic anthropology. But we use sort of the model of the Big Brothers Big Sisters mentorship program that is adopted by many other LGBTQ groups and other, just a lot. And so I had participated in Boston in an LGBTQ mentorship program that where I got a lot of this inspiration of collecting the information from both mentor and mentee, and of being considerate with the matching in that, and sort of the resources behind that, and the justification, and sort of the research that supports that. And ultimately, I think my experience with that was a failed mentorship experience, where I was mentoring a younger individual, and went through the training, and we went through the matching system, and it just ultimately didn't work out. And that sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? So, but it got me thinking, and like me wanting to think about that, and contribute to something that I could see working. It just didn't work in my specific experience, but it wasn't a flawed system. It was just sometimes it doesn't work. So yeah, we put a lot of work in to that mentorship program. So I really hope that it is something that can be resurrected, because I really do think that forensic anthropology specific one is important. We're very different, as Cate said, from pathology, from all the other sections, and we have much different needs, both as mentors and as proteges. So I really think that a focused forensic anthropology one is really important, and that it's done in a meaningful way.
And I think that from what I understand, that the Academy was going to develop some sort of mentorship program, but I don't have any details about what that looks like. So but
for what it's worth, I'm on the ABFA outreach committee, and we've been floating the idea too. So for people who are watching this, if this is something that you would care about or want to have enacted, either through the AAFS, through the ABFA, through something else entirely, the CEA, let us know. Obviously, we all care about this.
So with the things we've talked about in mind, such as the competition and reliance on peer mentorship, changing demographics, what sort of pathways forward would you particularly recommend to promote a positive mentor-mentee relationship, combating some of those issues that were cited within your survey?
So this is a tough one, because I struggle with this when I talk with my students, because on the one hand, I'm saying this is a competitive field, but on the other hand, I'm saying this is an intensely soul satisfying and wonderful field. And they're like, how do those things mesh up? And it's like, well, when you have a field of only 500 or so practitioners worldwide, and everybody knows everybody, and sometimes there's competition, and sometimes there's issues, and sometimes there's drama, you find your people quickly, and you keep them, and you love them, and you nurture that network. And so, I think that the flip side of the competitive coin is that when you find the people that do have your back, it's very clear. And I feel like I have my group, my peer mentors, that I could not do without. Particularly, and I want to make sure we hit on this before we run out of time, in terms of mental health, because that came up as something, a negative trait of proteges. In about a third of cases, mentors were saying anxiety was a negative trait, and we tried to sort of spin that in our discussion of like, hey, we just got a really valuable way in here. You know, you said you think a third of your mentees struggle with anxiety. Beyond just saying, oh, that's a negative trait, what we have to do something about that. We have to, mental health care in this field is abysmal. Justin Goldstein and his colleagues have talked about this and published on this. And people are beginning to think about it and beginning to grapple with it. But we still, I think, have this idea of, like someone said, cold, callous, sort of remove and reserve. And if you let emotions in, then somehow you are less than. If you struggle with anxiety and you show it, then somehow you are less than. And I think that the fact that we are having maybe a third of our proteges struggling with this, and let's say many of the mentors as well, whether or not they reported that, this is, the new generation of mentors, the new paradigm of mentors needs to confront this head on.
And I think that, with, again, our, as sort of Cate was talking about earlier, our field is entering this sort of time where we are sort of reassessing things, right? And so we are spending more time, hopefully, with self-reflection. And I think, reflecting on how our field contributes to that anxiety is a source of that anxiety. Of course, everyone's experience with anxiety is, very unique, but at the same time, the field also, and this competitiveness, lack of access to mentors, all of the things that we've all experienced contribute directly to that anxiety. So I think that understanding the system, the flaws of the system, and how we've all in some ways played roles in that system of propagating that structure, I think is hugely important. And again, like Cate said, it takes the culture to change, right? This isn't just, if we make a good mentorship program, that will solve everything, right? It's the perspective of the practitioners that needs to be altered. And so I think, again, we just need to self-reflect on how our structures are enabling this anxiety perspective and feeling that we often all feel. So yeah, hopefully self-reflection is something that is inherent in any of this work that we're doing. So I hope that that's a part of it.
And it's also, I think, important to acknowledge too, that we're never going to be able to get rid of all of the negatives, especially considering the gravity of the work that we do and the emotional weight of our interactions with decedents, with survivors in the case of human rights work. That is in and of itself a source of stress. And so, right, rather than contributing to just, a hostile sort of field environment, we need to be there for each other. We need to really nurture these networks, both vertically and horizontally oriented.
I also think that another important thing for ensuring success in this potentially moving forward is, mentors are not, and I think we point this out in the paper, but mentors are not born, right? It's a skill. Some people might be inherently good with it, right? But others, and most, I would say, you have to learn how to be a mentor. Part of that is through the mentoring process, but a part of it is also there are resources out there that we highlight in the discussion. There are resources, great resources online, STEM-based mentorship resources that I think both mentors and proteges should read. It's not just for the mentor. The protege should understand, kind of how mentors are being sort of trained and positioned as well. So I think that involvement of both, mentors and mentees or proteges in reading that literature and in going through trainings. Some universities offer, training and mentorship opportunities, and there's online things now available. Of course, this all takes time and we're all really busy. But again, if we want the field to change and we want perspectives to change, we have to prioritize this stuff. And so I think actively having both proteges and mentors engaging with that material and thinking about what it means to be both a good protege and a good mentor, and understanding that it's a two-way street, right? It's not just information being bestowed on from a mentor to a protege. It's information is going both ways, and the mentor can get just as much out of a mentorship process as a protege can. So I think understanding that, and it's not just that you are telling somebody how just to navigate this field successfully. That's a part of it, sure, but the understanding that it's the overall well-being of the person too. It's not just, are you able to get a job, but do you have a good work-life balance? Do you have friends and colleagues that you can talk to about stuff? Do are you happy? Stuff like that. And what can we do to improve those things if you're not? So I think understanding, again, the different roles that mentors can play, I think are also huge. And it's not necessarily just about professionalization.
Yeah, and this is something that we have talked extensively about as well. I think when I think of my own sort of mentors that I've had, and ones that the mentorship I've really valued, it's in cases not of peer, but in this sort of hierarchical top down, it wasn't really like a top down, like I was the protege consuming, this knowledge from above. It was more of a back and forth. So it was a mutually beneficial sort of relationship that I had with mentors, and the best mentors I've had have had an openness and a willingness to understand a different perspective, especially a younger perspective, a perspective that hasn't been in our field and, really like broken down. They haven't been broken yet. So, again, I always refer to Norm, because, he wasn't just there to just, push knowledge onto me. He was very open to knowing, I don't understand why this is an issue, or, what's the younger generation doing with this? I don't quite get this. And he's open to listening and to learning. And it doesn't mean always agreement, but it means this like communication. It means listening, actually listening. It's having empathy. It's, and it's treating each other with respect, I think, is a big part of it. I think that it can become lopsided when you have one person that's in a position of power and is deciding the fate of a protege. But I do think that there is sort of this two-way learning that should be stressed. I think it's hard sometimes for those who have worked their way up to the top and have been in the field for a very long time. And, like so many other fields, I think forensic anthropologists are perfectionists and they want to always be right. And they, there's sort of a limit to what they think they should be learning or how they should be evolving. But I don't know, to me, a good mentor is one who understands their own like limitations of their experiences, and they not only listen, but they seek out others to learn about their experiences. And so I think that really is, a lot of it is on the mentors. It's on people who sometimes become accidental mentors, that they don't go in, it's not formalized, but they're good interacting and providing that knowledge and taking the knowledge from others, even if they are considered below their station. So I do think that that's one of the reinforcing things that we should really be pushing in a mentorship program. It's the ability to learn on both sides.
And I think the mentors, and I'm talking now about vertical sort of relationships, mentors, even in those vertical relationships, I think have to be human if they expect their mentees to engage with them. There are many aspects in which I have mentorship mismatch with my mentees. I am a cis white woman who is heterosexual. Like I do what I can, right? But I'm not hitting all those buttons for all of my mentees. And so I just sort of try to be who I am, just like I let them see me freaking out. The other day, I was like, trying to put on a mask while like doing online banking on my phone. And like someone was knocking on this door, someone was knocking on that door. And I could hear them out there going, oh God, like she's really busy. I don't want to bother her. Like they can tell that I am stressed out. And I maybe that stresses them out, but I need them to see that, I need them to see that I struggle with the work-life balance. Like I have had students leave my program because they're like, what you are doing here with the working too hard and the not seeing your family, like, I don't want that. And that was hard, to lose a student, but it was also a tremendously important finding, I think, for that student to realize that it is a struggle at every level. And if we're up here pretending, we know it all, we are the dispensers of knowledge and we have it all figured out, we don't have it all figured out. And it's really hard.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that just like you do with your parents, that you realize that they may pretend to have all the answers, but they don't, and they have their own struggles and they have their own flaws, and trying to have some understanding about what they're going through, because especially in academia where you may be juggling so many different things. I mean, in a lot of different applications of forensic anthropology, but in academia, you might have how many students that you're advising, and having some understanding about what what a potential mentor or advisor or whatnot is going through, I think is beneficial too. Yeah.
So from this conversation, it sounds like the reliance on peer mentorship, the sort of relationship building that moves from vertical mentorship to horizontal mentorship, means that we need to really adjust our expectations, everyone involved, that the mentor should know that it's not just going to be a one-way street. Be prepared to receive mentorship from their protege as well. And that people shouldn't seek relationships that are vertical, or seek single relationships even, but rather have an expectation for a sort of 3D multi-access mentorship idea in what they're looking for, what they're expecting. And maybe that'll help us understand what we get from certain people in those relationships, what we can give to certain people, and then what we need to seek in a different environment.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. You summed it up, I think, really eloquently, better than me. So thank you. But yeah, I think that's very true. And I think that, right now, or for some folks, mentorship that's not in forensic anthropology is going to be beneficial, more beneficial. It doesn't, I mean, not to say that mentorship in forensic anthropology is bad, but just that you might be getting more substantial mentorship in other realms, either with other identities, other sort of groups or clubs, or civic groups. For instance, I just saw and signed up for the Out in STEM, the OSTEM, which is on a lot of different campuses around the country. They've just started a national mentorship program. And so you could sign up to be a mentor, a mentee, or both, which I thought was interesting too. So you can both be, a mentor and be a mentee for different people. So, there's other options that are out there, right? If we don't have it right now in forensic anthropology, hopefully we will, but there are options, hopefully, that people can find in other programs, either at the universities, or through things like OSTEM, or other, I know that there's others out there that I just don't know about. So that might be even a more beneficial route for people to get some of this mentorship that they're not necessarily getting. And it obviously doesn't preclude their success in forensic anthropology. I think it would only help in them going forward.
The only thing I would add on to Laura's summary as like takeaways from this would be to kind of put it out there for both mentees and mentors to keep in mind that like your experience is not universal. So the road that you know to success is not the exact road that your mentee can take. And so that's that's why we need those multiple mentorships. That's why we need these different views, these diverse pathways for incoming and continuing students in the field.
So are there any final thoughts, any questions that still need to be answered, any things you want to put out there into the universe to wrap up this current discussion?
I mean, one thing that I found promising, again, this was a few years back, I guess when we were gauging the interest in a formalized mentorship program in forensic anthropology, and the D&I committee in one of our forums at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences meeting had a discussion with both student groups or students and then professionals. And I mean, there was overwhelming support at both levels, right? There's a ton of students, both undergraduate and graduate, who wanted a formalized mentorship program. And then afterwards, we talked to professionals, and basically everyone in the room said that they were, willing to be a mentor and excited about that prospect. So it's exciting to see that. I think there are a lot of people in our field who would like to be a part of a more codified, and that they are probably doing mentorship, or, obviously already, in these more informal, either peer-to-peer, but obviously with advisor and other relationships. So, but I think that there's a lot of people out there, which I think gives me hope.
Yeah, what you two are doing today also gives me hope. The content that you are creating for your colleagues is you are providing mentorship. You just talked about having a book club, or maybe that was when we were discussing offline. That is mentorship. Working through the literature together, bouncing ideas off of each other. Like that makes my heart very happy to see like another group that reminds me of our group, the group that led to the publication of this study.
Ditto.
Okay, then with that, all positivity to end it off. Thank you to Dr. Winburn, Dr. Byrd, Dr. Tallman. It was a pleasure to have you all here and discuss your work and hear about your continuing work in mentorship and other things. And just thank you very much for being here. And hopefully we can talk to you more in the future.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the work that you're doing with the CEA.
Absolutely.